Hey, where do you guys want to aim? Sorry.
Actually, just towards the screen.
So just keep it
Yeah.
there.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, we're gonna get started. Hello everyone, my name is Julie Hellman. I am the Vice President. Matthew is going to be running a little bit late today, so I'll get started without him. First order of business, we're gonna have a moment of silence for Martha Horne.
Yep.
Former Attorney General Tom Horne, his wife passed away and the funeral is actually right now. Rev Maupin, one of our speakers, is actually right there right now. So he's gonna be running a little bit late, so we're gonna have like a 20-second moment of silence for her. Okay, next order of business. Our final meeting is next week. It should be back in the VAC building, correct?
Correct.
So no looking around for this weird room. After that, May 2nd, we're gonna have a fundraiser at Spokes. Please come, we need money. After that, we're doing a Memorial Day volunteering event with Riders USA. We're gonna be planting and removing about 500 flags at the Veteran Cemetery off of Cave Creek Road. Okay.
Okay, so for those of you who don't know, my name is Rick Thomas. I used to be the president last year, and I'm the current chairman for the Republicans United, which is the alumni version of CRU. This Constitution is almost a carbon copy from College Republicans, but it's been heavily modified since then, and it's still not a perfect document. And as you know, we went through a lot of controversy recently, and we wanted to address those controversies and those issues that have arisen from it, and we want to make sure that the club is where it needs to be and to prevent something like this from happening again, where members may be a little disruptive in the mechanics of the club. So this is an example of how an amendment is proposed to the College Republicans United. How this works is any of the members can write up any kind of edits or any kind of changes they want to the Constitution. They bring that proposal to the executive board, and they only need to find one person to endorse it from the executive board. So in this instance, we're going to be changing some things that I'll show you. I've gotten Matthew Northway to approve it, and the executive board will be voting on it and approving it along with the membership here. So let's go to the next slide. So in the white section here, this is what the current Constitution says for our non-discrimination statement. The yellow segment is what we're adding to it. So what we're adding in particular is our calling out identity politics that's rampant on the left, and it's also starting to rise on the right, unfortunately. We want to make sure that people who believe in some sort of political extremism, including but not limited to Marxism, Nazism, ethno-nationalism, any kind of religious intolerance, or any kind of ideology that is opposed to recognizing the inherent dignity of all humanity, supports the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. No matter what policy we may agree, whether it's about abortion, or if it's about gay rights, or anything of that matter, we want to make sure that it's within a certain framework that is within normal political discourse and not going off the fringes with identity politics. So this was recommended by the Central Committee of Republicans United to add this, and including the next amendment, which would be changing the automatic termination of an executive board member. So originally in the white, we had a problem with the College Republicans where an executive board member would not go to a meeting. Literally the entire semester after being elected, they just never went to a single meeting, and they were never removed from the executive board. So we included this to make sure that never happens again. And on top of that, if any member on the executive board has a belief that is hidden or concealed from the general members, referring back to the non-discrimination statement about having views that's consistent with Marxism, Nazism, ethno-nationalism, or a kind of religious discrimination, they need to be removed from the board. Now, there's an appeal process where if a member is under that category, well, let's say we have two candidates that are running for the executive board and one has maybe pro-choice viewpoints, we don't want that person to be labeled as an extremist. So there would be an appeal process where Dr. Loftus maybe would be able to step in and prevent someone from being kicked out. That goes to another amendment elsewhere that's already in the Constitution. So there are protections for members like that, but we want to make sure that a member who has certain viewpoints is not in the club and does not make it onto the executive board. There was some debate and discussion about this on crew chat about playing devil's advocate or having political discourse, and this is not a speech code that we're putting into the Constitution. It's more about political extremism, and we might have some differing opinions on this, but does anyone have any questions or would like to debate the proposal? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just worried that that's very vague, and it's left up to
The interpretation.
Yeah, basically, like especially nowadays when wearing a MAGA hat is extremist to
Right.
many on the left. I just want to know it doesn't really.
So that's where my abortion thing came up. We have a candidate running for the executive board who's pro-life, and another one who believes in pro-choice viewpoints. We don't want this person being labeled as a political extremist and being labeled, baby killer or those sorts of things where they could just be kicked out for having the wrong thought. That's where Dr. Loftus would step in as the club advisor who would look at that person's viewpoints and things that have been said previously, and he may or may not want to appeal that decision. So there is another layer of protection for that member who might be falsely accused.
Who is it up to terminate someone?
So that would be an executive board decision. And it also could be proposed from the membership. So say you don't like someone up here, you can come to the executive board, get that one. It's kind of like the same process as the Constitution, getting one person from the executive board to have a trial on that, but then Dr. Loftus would serve as judicial review of that amendment or that process to ban someone.
Why? I feel like it should be up to the the vote, like we're doing right now.
Right, so.
I mean, I don't know if that's something else that we can do.
Well, this was a concern.
I don't think it should be left up to leadership because
True.
them being the face of the organization in a lot of ways are more concerned about, understandably so, about image.
Right.
So, and especially with recent events, I'm just worried that
If a wrong
would-
click
would
takes
throw
over the
someone under
leadership.
bus
Right.
in order to, which arguably has happened in some ways.
Right.
What's not, I'm just saying that I don't believe it should be left up to executive leadership, and that this is very vague.
I can agree with that. That's also where the second layer comes in. The reason why we have it this way and not with the general membership is because in the past, the general membership of the College Republicans, where they would have a room full of people, they would bring in a sorority or a fraternity that has no affiliations with the club, would come in, mass vote their viewpoints, and then you'd have that same issue. So the idea is the executive board would prevent something like that from happening, but even if the executive board is corrupt and we have a clique of people that believe in a certain viewpoint, again, Dr. Loftus would come in and he can even wipe out the entire executive board and just call for a general election. He has that power in the Constitution.
But then it's just up to one person. I guess like what I'm saying is, and that example that you gave is, I don't see how that's valid because you have to be a dues-paying member to be able to vote.
Right.
So, I mean, was that entire sorority and or fraternity?
Well, the
So then
Constitution
that's
back then
irrelevant.
wasn't enforced.
That doesn't apply here.
Right.
I don't understand why you brought that as an example of what.
Good.
So I'd like some more explicit language around religious discrimination, because just, for example, would criticizing your religion potentially count as that?
And I do want to prevent something like that from happening. If you have a religion, let's say Scientology,
Right.
and there's a lot of legitimate criticism with Scientology, we don't want that label going out saying, well, just because Scientologists do a certain thing, you're a bigot for challenging them. We don't want that in the club.
Right.
So I agree, maybe that does need to be retweaked. How would you recommend in rewording it then? Because we can make those changes today and then vote on those new changes.
I would need to think about it. I've got a migraine right now, so I'm not entirely clear on all of it.
And for the non-members, the observers in the room, you're allowed to have an input on Stu. Yeah.
I also just want to mention that, like, I just don't, I mean, I understand I think it's more what you do in support of one of these ideologies than simply, how far are you willing to go, like, considering, like, belief, like, some people may have, again, I think it's just so vague that, like, someone could say, oh, you're a nationalist just because you believe in wanting to, you know, go back to, like, preserving your lineage or your heritage or culture, things
Right.
like that.
You can have
All those things fall under that,
Sure.
and I have a big issue with, again, the vagueness, because if you even believe in one of those things, or even, you know, mention something, then what's the, talk about these checks and balances, but I don't think those checks and balances are valid. I think just having this is an affront to that, and I think that, like, you're talking about, I mean, those are ideology, it says ideology, I mean, if you believe in that, so what? Who cares?
well,
Unless what you do I mean, to what point is it, do you draw the line? I guess, like, I'm asking, where is your line on that?
So-
Like, I have no issues with, if you wanna believe that, so be it. Again, this is all about mature discussion and discourse.
So let me use an example. A couple of years ago, when college Republicans were expanding to Flagstaff, and these were people that knew other college Republican members from Tucson who were setting up this new chapter, they gave them all the material, they allowed them to create a club without knowing that they were Bernie Sanders supporters. They were liberal Democrats setting up a Republican club. We are a Republican club. We're not a Leninist Trotskyite club. We're not a National Socialist club. We're not religious fundamentalists. We are a Republican club. So within that baseline, anything outside of that framework is where we're going to have an issue, because you're no longer a Republican club if you start bringing National Socialists or communists into the club as part of the membership. You don't want a Marxist running for the executive board, taking over the presidency, and then supporting Democrats as a Republican club.
So that's where I've been, like, you have the right and the left. Where on the, I mean, like, especially nowadays, the fractures in the party, I mean, you can't just say that. I mean, I understand if you go far left, yeah, but, like, you're talking the entire, you're saying you want people that are on the right, essentially.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. But on that note as well, if someone is a leftist or otherwise, and they just want to join to broaden their horizons, to get an understanding, not necessarily, I mean, it's hard to come by people like that nowadays, but it's possible.
Sure.
What this means is that they would not be allowed to.
Well, they
For example.
They could join as an affiliate. They can join to observe it, just like how we have other people here who aren't qualified to be members because they're not a college student. But if I understand what you're saying, we want to have them come in. We definitely want to have that dialogue with them and change opinions, and that's all what we're about. We brought in Democrats into this club before, not as members, but as observers at least. When within the framework of the Constitution and what the Republican Party is, it's a bit kind of vague. You've got your libertarians, you've got your rhinos, you've got your paleoconservatives, you've got a little bit more people on the far right spectrum of it. But when you start talking about blatant Nazis, they're not in that spectrum anymore. They're off. They're off into a different tangent altogether, is what I'm saying at least. But I do agree if they want to have something a little bit more specific, or maybe a definition of what these ideologies are.
Yeah, I want to know at what point you would kick someone out, I guess. Someone has, devil's advocate, if someone has a tattoo of a swastika.
Out. I would say out.
Immediately, even if their belief no longer aligns with that.
Why do they still have it though?
What do you mean? You know how expensive and painful it is to get those removed?
I would start up a fund to get that tattoo removed part of the
Well,
club.
how can you start a fund if you're just going to kick them out right off the bat?
So that's
Yeah.
So okay, so let me use an example. And this was a huge controversial moment when we had Ashton Whitty, when she brought in her boyfriend. This was Baked Alaska. This is someone who went to Charlottesville, and everyone is called a neo-Nazi because he went there. He no longer holds those viewpoints anymore, and he says that he wants to have like a dialogue about why he was part of the alt-right and why he left it. That's a productive, in my opinion, a productive meeting to have. Other people would disagree with me on that, and I got into a lot of trouble for kind of defending him on that aspect. If a person says, yeah, I used to be part of this movement and I left it, and we had that conversation with the person, I don't believe you did something 6 years ago, you ought to be kicked out. We should be able to grow as people and to change opinions. So I would say that no, that person would not be kicked out for his previous affiliations, but we need to be at least watchful for radicalness. Yeah.
So, just to go off this point, I think under the B bullet, we need to put explicit definitions of what each of these ideologies is. So
Okay.
it's explicit within the language of the Constitution to
Like, what is a Marxist? What is a Nazi? What is?
right.
Okay.
Exactly.
I'll-
It's pretty common in legal documents anyway that you
Sure.
need to do that. So
Does anyone oppose to that idea of modifying it with definitions?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
This is my first meeting that I'm attending, and I'm purely observing. but,
Sure.
I can see the grayness in the issue. I assume that this is your own constitution for your own club, is that correct?
Correct, and we're modifying it with the yellow. So
So-
this document, these two,
We're proposing to modify it.
right?
Yeah, so I would think, if you're running the club, there would be two baselines that would determine whether or not you're a member. One is, are you a student at ASU or a student in general? I don't know if this goes beyond ASU. And the second would be, are you a registered Republican? That kind of takes care of all of that other stuff.
We have brought in libertarians, registered libertarians who were conservative at one time. We were trying to bring them into the Republican Party. The goal is to expand the party. So a person who is not registered to vote, but is a conservative, at least ideally, and they would vote along the lines of being Republican, but they're not part of the party.
That wouldn't be an affiliate like we were talking about?
Right.
Versus a member?
So when I say member versus an affiliate, would be someone who's not qualified to be a member under the Constitution. So that would be a person who's not attending college. So I'm going to use Kenny as an example. She has not joined ASU yet, so she would be ineligible to be part of the College Republicans United. But we still work with her, we still table with her. She's fundamentally a crew member at heart. So she's allowed to join, she's allowed to give her opinion, she just can't vote for the executive board or run.
But if someone was a registered Democrat or a registered, I don't know, what, the Green Party or something like
So
that.
maybe that's because those viewpoints are inconsistent with Republicans' values. Maybe they're a blue dog Democrat for whatever reason, they never left the Democratic Party. In theory, maybe that could apply, but maybe that's another amendment we could add to the Constitution to clarify that kind of belief.
Yeah, I mean, it's a gray area, so I mean, the one way you get black and white is, are they registered Republican, are they registered Libertarian?
We also have Republicans that are leaving the party and going independent, depending on who's currently running and what they
Yeah.
believe in, so that when they do vote, they can swing whichever way they want to go. So I think you've got to hear what it is that their beliefs are, whether it's moderate, far right, constitutional conservative, whatever their beliefs are, to kind of establish what's going to be all inclusive for your organization.
Right. So we
Yeah,
make,
yeah, that's interesting, because Tea Party does define in 3 parameters: constitutional republic, we're gonna follow the Constitution, fiscal responsibility, and then free markets, that we support free markets. So that might be, if you're looking for values, you might want to structure it based on value system.
and there are some Republicans who are inconsistent with those ideas. And I would say Mara would be ineligible to join CRU for having those kind of off-kilter beliefs. It's possible. So for modifying it, explicit definitions, would anyone want to include other categories? We can come back to this, we can table this idea for now and vote on this later. Yes, Marissa?
So in the Libertarian Party, they have an actual policy document for their executive board. That's basically like a policy behavior document that helps to outline all those things as a supplement
Okay.
to their bylaws.
Not what they believe in, but behavior-wise?
Yeah, behavior-wise, so that this way you can have freedom of speech while making sure that that freedom of speech is respectful and not something that where people feel like they're being I don't know, like bullied or whatnot.
Could you share something like that to
Yeah, I
us
can
so we
send
can
it
take
to
a
you
look at it?
guys.
Okay.
That's what it is. But that might assist you in getting to what you're trying to get to. Is rather than having it extremely spelled out in here, having it reference a policy document that might be a little more specific.
Would you all be in favor of doing that and coming back to this later?
So, tabling it,
Tabling it for now, modifying it, and coming back for a different meeting to vote on it.
do you need a motion or what?
Yeah, a motion, if anyone wants to propose that.
A motion, table this amendment.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, that covers the Constitution then.
Awesome.
Got it.
Okay.
Were those two separate amendments, or
They were two separate amendments because there were two different articles.
so do we need to do it for both?
No, because we lumped the two together for the motion.
Okay, first speaker for tonight, Marissa.
Who?
I don't know, it's some random girl they picked up from somewhere. Hi everybody, thanks for having me again. I wanted to briefly talk to you, and let me get it up on my phone, about something that's going on tomorrow at this Phoenix City Council meeting, but it's also been happening. Tempe, I think Tempe's been either trying to get it passed or they've been doing a pilot project or something. It's called Vision Zero. Has anyone heard of Vision Zero? Okay, what do you know about
I
it?
believe Boston was the most recent city that implemented it, but in an effort to reduce any kind of traffic accidents with either other pedestrians or other vehicles, they'll reduce the speed limit within the city down to an area that keeps it within their accepted guidelines, which in some places is acceptability of 0. So you may have an area where the speed limit is currently 35, that could come all the way down to 15 or 20 miles per hour, thus increasing your commutes where you're going. And one of the challenges for Phoenix and Tempe is until there's an appropriate mass transit to where it's convenient for people to get around, it's kind of what the negative aspects of it are. Until we have a better transit for individuals. You have your senior citizens who could have to walk a mile or two to get to a bus or get to the light rail to get someplace that they're going, which makes it inconvenient in 110 degree heat.
Yep. And so, and I think you raised your hand also?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what do you know about it?
I know it's again, as he said, it's pretty much a project to reevaluate speed limits within the cities to pretty much lower them to what they believe would be safe, especially around cyclists and that, which as a cyclist, I cycle to work every day. There's a lot of instances where we've seen in cities where they do it too far, and it's really just a move by them to kind of, push mass transit and that by trying to make using cars more inefficient.
Right. So I used to work in Boston. When I worked in the private sector, I worked for a company that was in Boston, and I'd have to go there often. I grew up in Connecticut, so I went to that area frequently. So I know what it was like before they did this and then after they did it. And to have this come to Phoenix, this will be, and Tempe, this will be, it will make driving just god awful. And we don't have the density to support a public transportation system like what you see out in Boston or some of the other bigger cities. And actually, and the reason why I think the city has been pushing this is because they've had a decline in ridership on the light rail. And so, and there's also going to be a initiative that's on the ballot in August to eliminate the light rail that for those that don't know, I work for Councilman Sal DeCiccio. And so we've been supporting this initiative because the light rail has taken away considerable funds from public transit, from public transit for buses that are things that we actually do need. We need to have buses ride more hours of the day for people that have early morning jobs, which is a lot of labor type of jobs start very early in the morning. We need to be able to have more money to fill potholes and and expand roads as needed, but we also need more money for public safety. And so instead, what Vision Zero, which is a very highly Democrat Socialist initiative that's been being pushed, they want to make driving just absolutely a nightmare. And so in Boston, what they did is they set 25 miles per hour as their default speed limit for all roads. That is so frustrating. And then they increased police, not to actually do actual policing to keep people safe, but just to do tickets. So that then it was another obstacle in order to be able to drive friendly. And so Phoenix, though, is very different in the formatting of Boston. Phoenix has a grid system. Tempe has a grid system, and most of Tempe too. And so our roads are designed to be able to have a higher speed while it being safe for pedestrians, for bicyclists, and for people in vehicles alike. However, they feel like if they can take double the time that it takes for your commute, then they'll increase ridership. Because right now for me, I live in North Phoenix, I work down in downtown Phoenix. It takes me 20 minutes if there's no traffic to get to work. It takes me 45 minutes on normal traffic days. But if I took the light rail, it would take an hour and a half. If they reduce the speed from 45 miles per hour, which is the speed on most of the roads I'm driving, and bring it down to 25 miles an hour, it will take me well over an hour to get to work. It will create congestion. It will just be god awful. Like, I will hate life trying to drive to work in that.
And more anger.
Yes, much more anger.
And actually, it will be much more polluting because the number one pollutant is not that cars drive fast. It's actually cars that sit in traffic because
Yeah.
they're wasting energy, not moving anywhere. You know.
Yes, and actually I used to work for a trucking company. That was my first big career after I left being a journalist. And idling was the number one contributor to pollution, and so that was also the biggest waste that we had. So we had to do things to drastically reduce the idle time for both of those goals. So what, and I've kind of been, I don't know how many of you have seen the video that I made on, I made a little video that was a montage from being at the Awatuki festival over the weekend. They had ponies that were for kids, like a pony ride for kids, and then Wells Fargo had a coach, one of those Wells Fargo. So I did a mocking video mocking the fact that now we should add ponies and horses and have a free socialist pony program to be able to push once Vision Zero goes through, because horses can actually go faster than cars will be allowed to go at that point in time. So it was a funny video to bring to light, but it's a very serious thing, because the other issues that will come from it is businesses will suffer, and our economy is going to suffer in Phoenix. If Chandler and Mesa and Gilbert, Peoria, Glendale, if they don't adopt the same type of program as Phoenix and Tempe, who's going to want to live and work in the cities that have this policy? It's going to be awful to have to drive through this. And so businesses are going to be encouraged to move out of the city. People are going to be encouraged to move out of the city. That's going to create a problem for tourism. And so the only way that this is going to get killed is if we can have people show up to the city council meeting tomorrow at 2:30. And the reason why is because when you have the city council, there's only 3 ways you can get something on the agenda. The mayor has to put it on the agenda. The city manager can put something on the agenda, or 3 council people can sign to request to have something put on the agenda, but that's public record. So since we don't have the third one, that means that either the city manager or the mayor put it on the agenda. They wouldn't put this on the agenda with a new mayor coming in unless they thought they could get it to pass. Because that would look really bad for a new mayor coming in, trying to push something so extreme. So the only way that you can get these things to stop, because what they'll do is they'll say, oh, no, we're not trying to slow down traffic, kind of like what they did with the light rail, right? They did the same thing when it came to, Complete Streets. How many are familiar with Complete Streets? So the Complete Streets program is something they did that's similar to this. This is kind of like phase 2 of Complete Streets, where they started eliminating multi-lane roads and replacing one of the lanes with a bike lane, like super wide bike lanes. And so they piloted that in Awatuki, and now basically that's kind of the standard as we're expanding, as roads are being redone around the city. It's been standard that they're reducing the lane sizes, sometimes reducing it to 1 lane and putting in these super wide bike lanes. Well, there's not enough traffic in Phoenix of people that ride their bikes to justify that. And they don't not ride their bikes because there aren't huge bike lanes. That's just not what they want to do as a hobby. But it's another way to create congestion, and that's essentially what they're trying to do, is create congestion so that people will then not ride. Will maybe use the light rail or buses. If they can make your ride to work be as long as it takes to get in traffic as it is to get on the light rail or the bus, they feel they can push people that way.
So it's a form of social engineering.
Correct.
Right.
And even more potential crashes.
Yes, so crashes.
If it's so narrow.
Yes, yep. You had a question?
Well, I kind of have a point that your ride would be even worse on buses. I don't know how much you've used them, but the light rail is still miles better than the buses, and frankly, nobody wants to be on those buses.
No, but ridership is decreasing on the light rail too.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just saying that even if they manage to get the traffic all screwed up, they wouldn't get their aims.
they wouldn't get their what?
They wouldn't get their aims.
Oh, no, they're not going to. The whole, yes.
Yeah, I mean, as it is right now, what will happen? I don't, you know, that's just the that's just where the cities work. They want to do that, but you know, I think it's interesting that they do that. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry, I just completely blanked.
So it is a form of social engineering. This is something that comes from the socialist side because it's the same line of thought that they need to be able to control all of every aspect of our lives. And so, and the control on the Democratic Party, which I don't think most Republicans realize, is that comes from, and to be clear, since we're recording, I'm not speaking on behalf of the city today, because I'm not allowed to talk about politics when I'm talking for the city. So, the control, the Democrats, they are very good at starting their control at the base level of elected government. And so that means building the bench at school board level, building the bench on city council. And that's where they really focus, because from there they feel like they'll build enough of leadership from there that they can then take it at the state legislative level and beyond. And you can tell from this last election cycle that they're being pretty effective in their model of building the bench, because they're able to then handpick their candidates to go to the next level. They don't let people, like, you can't as a Democrat just go and run and be treated fairly by the party. It just doesn't work that way. And so they handpick their candidates, and if someone violates that and runs, they will drive you out from being successful. So it's really important, if we want to be able to have control over our day-to-day lives, that we have Republicans and conservatives and liberty Republicans that are running for these offices. Now, the only good thing that's going to come from Vision Zero is that I think people in Phoenix, we like that people in Phoenix, I think we like the fact that we've had freer forms of transportation, and being able to drive 45 miles, having these big, huge roads to drive down. It's kind of a hallmark, especially coming from the East Coast where you have these cramped roads everywhere. But once they do this, they're going to do it gradually. It will be kind of like the boiling frog type of a thing. Probably tomorrow they're going to recommend that they first do it as a pilot project. And then the city's going to call that pilot project a huge, resounding success. No matter what happens, they will say it's a huge success. Typically when they do these type of things, like for example, they were trying to force, a community wanted their street, the dead end, opened up. That's what was supposed to originally happen. But again, they wanted to make traffic be congested, and so instead they wanted to put delineators. Before the community was able to vote on it, the city already bought the delineators and had them in stock. It takes 60 days to buy the delineators. So from the time that they started trying to get this program in place, okay. So from the time they had ordered the delineators, that was when their public comments section had started. So they didn't actually care what the public was going to say at all. They were going to put these delineators in place, shut off the road, and add an extra 10 minutes to this neighborhood in their transit time to be able to get out onto the highway, just by blocking this one area. It's the same thing when it comes to this. They're going to maybe start with a pilot program area, say we're going to do this just in this one area because we'll do it downtown, because that's where our fatalities have been. So we'll do it downtown. And then the city will internally make a policy that going forward, they're going to just continue to make their reports say that we need to have this road to be 25 miles per hour. Now it should be known as right now, before any single street can get their speed limit changed, there already is a study process that's done, and it's a very sophisticated study. So every road that has 45 miles per hour as the speed limit, there was already this big, huge, expensive study that was done. So the purpose of this cannot possibly be that they want to study the roads better, because we already spend a ton of money doing that.
The purpose cannot possibly be that they're trying to save pedestrians, because we have programs for that too. And most of the pedestrian accidents we've had is because pedestrians are not using the current crosswalks, they're not using the hawk lights, they're not using whatever we put in place, they're walking into the middle of traffic. There's no amount of changing lanes that's going to impact that whatsoever. There's no amount of changing speeds that's going to impact that. If people walk into the middle of the traffic, they're going to get hurt. That's how it works. So this social engineering, if this is something that we don't stop, then we now are going to have a city council that's going to set up to be very far left, that then they will infringe on other things. Like they wanted to do a medical marijuana tax, a huge tax that would have basically put the medical marijuana industry in Phoenix out of business. Well, what we found when we did that, whether you're for marijuana or against it, there was a lot of young kids that the traditional medicine that their doctors put them on didn't work, so their doctors tried medical marijuana and it cut down on some really awful symptoms that they were having. And so us destroying that industry in Phoenix was going to raise the cost of medicine for all these families, which doesn't get covered by insurance.
And that's a problem in itself.
Mm-hmm. And so if they can be successful in this one thing as this big thing that should never pass, they will continue to do this in other things, to push the light rail, to cripple whatever businesses they don't want to have, because they think that they should be able to control your life. And that is what this comes down to. Yes.
So, what's your plan for tomorrow? Like, I've not attended the Phoenix City Council meeting, but I have attended many Scottsdale City Council meetings. And one of the things I've noticed is, sometimes City Council, you can like go in and say, well, I want to speak, be one of the speakers, and put your name in. But a lot of the council members have already made up their mind. And so what I notice is, the ones that are organized go in wearing either the same shirt or the same color to show, even if they can't speak, where they stand on the issue of the day. So have you coordinated like a colored shirt or something like that?
We haven't, because for the city council, when they coordinate their shirts, so most likely, so Kate is big on coordinating color shirts, Mayor Kate. So Mayor Kate probably is gonna have a group of people going in there with colored shirts. The colored shirts people are typically the paid people. So they're not actually effective for city council to see that. You saw, for example, with the Chinese Cultural Center, they'd go in with the same colored shirts. They were immediately ignored, because if that city council person had the opinion that they were against that group, that mission, they saw the shirt and they just shut off their voice. But if they saw people in the community that were there speaking on their own accord, or putting in comment cards on their own accord, that's more powerful, because then this council people think that this is the view of unique individuals, and unique individual views are far more powerful to the city council members than interest groups.
So in Scottsdale, they tried to sneak getting rid of the cowboy as a symbol by putting in the saguaro cactus flower. Through the dark of night, they got 4 council members out of 7 to go for it. And we were effective at changing that because we had galvanized a whole bunch of emails and messages. So city council knew going into the meeting how they were going to vote on it, because they'd already felt a lot of heat before anybody even attended the meeting. But that was undone.
So I can tell you, so to answer your question, this is what's going to happen. Going in there, they pretty much already know the votes that are going to be. That's correct. But if they see a bunch of people show up and fill out comment cards saying that they're opposed, that will be the one marker that they're weak. Okay, if they have a weak marker going into the meeting, then that changes the game as to what everyone has already pre-agreed to. Because each councilperson in their respective district does change their mind based on public pressure. What we did to kill the medical marijuana tax, because that was going to win 7-1. And when we ended that meeting, it ended up failing unanimously. And the reason,
You have 8 voters?
Well, we did before we had our new mayor come. So now we're gonna have 9 votes tomorrow. Okay, so for medical marijuana, there's only 8 though. So it was gonna win 7-1 and ended up losing unanimously. And the reason why that happened is because we had basically an army of individual citizens show up there. We packed the place with like 300 people that were people that were supporting not having this tax go through, that were wanted the tax killed. And so in that case, there was only like 5 or 6 people that actually spoke, and they were serious medical marijuana patients, kids, cancer patients, other patients that spoke. And that was effective enough to change the minds. Tomorrow though, because it's not as sensitive of an issue, and they're gonna try to push having pedestrians that have been injured to speak, tomorrow it's more important for people to show up to say, no, that's not true. This is not gonna impact, we're not gonna like astronomically save the lives of pedestrians. We're actually going to hurt it because we're going to create these problems with traffic, and we're going to create this anger on our roads, and we're going to push businesses away, and we're going to cause our our revenue to decrease. We're going to cause our property values to decrease because people aren't going to want to live here, yada, yada, yada. If they see that there's a huge outcry from the community, it will overpower their shirts, their colored shirts. We call them AstroTurf. It will overpower them, and it will be effective. So they've already been getting a lot of emails and phone calls, but not enough. And so I highly encourage people to email them, even if you're not from Phoenix, but you have to drive through Phoenix, which I assume everyone does, then you should have a voice, in my opinion, as to what Phoenix does. And you should let them know that this is going to essentially put you in a position to not want to do business in Phoenix, not want to shop in Phoenix, avoid Phoenix at all costs. What will happen is if they think that they're going to lose, they're going to push to get it continued. Just so you know, whenever the Phoenix City Council pushes to continue anything, it means they think they're going to lose, and that they're going to wait till next time because they assume less people are going to show up. That's what they did with the light rail. South Phoenix businesses are going to completely go out of business because of that South Phoenix line, and the people in South Phoenix don't want the line, so they've just kept continuing it for over a year, so that fewer and fewer people showed up at every single meeting.
So if that's what's gonna happen, it's inevitable.
It's not inevitable because if we have a big enough of a crowd show up, like with medical marijuana, they went to continue it and the crowd yelled back, no, don't you dare, you're voting now. And they did, and it lost.
It's only inevitable until, you can perceive that it's inevitable, but the fact is if you run for city council, you support candidates where you're aware of your city council, you can get these people voted out. I was Tea Party Scottsdale president, and we shook things up for Scottsdale City Council. They were gonna build a big thing on the Desert Preserve and the Citizens United, and basically said, now you have to put it up you have to get approval from the citizens before you ever do anything with it anymore. So we took that right away from them. They push a lot of these other things with the Chamber of Commerce, which the citizens don't always agree with. And so you see some of the new people that are running for city council getting more votes than the seasoned people that get all the money and all the backing, whether it be from their various, networks of money. So it's not inevitable if you're engaged, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's not. If we have enough people show up tomorrow, opposed to it, and Councilman DeCiccio, I'm sure Jim is probably opposed to it. There's probably a couple of others that are opposed to it, or that are on the fence right now. It will give courage to the council people that are on the fence to go to no. It will also give courage for Councilman DeCiccio to be able to stop them from continuing it. And so he'll be able to take feedback from the crowd as to where it is. And so we really need the citizens to show up, to email, to make phone calls tomorrow, and to show up at the meeting. Yes.
Where's Delta fall on that?
I don't know.
So can you post the information on our CRU Facebook page, and then we
Yeah.
can send out an email
Yeah.
about the where and the when?
Sure.
Great.
Yeah, but I encourage everyone to show up. And the process, if you haven't been to the council meeting before to be able to speak, When you go in, at the very back of the room, there's little cards that you fill out, and on there you put a request to speak, or if you just want to give your opinion of support or oppose. Make sure that you put oppose to it. It will ask for the agenda item, and the agenda's right there, or you can ask the people there what the agenda item is. I'll put it in the message though that I post later today on it, and then just put that in there. But also you can email everyone tomorrow just as a heads up, so all the council people, I'll put the email addresses for everyone there. All right, the second, Rev Maupin is still delayed. The funeral's still going on. Okay.
Do you have an estimation of when he'll arrive?
Let me ask him.
Yeah. So guys, let me ask you a question. We have that other organization called Republicans United. So people have really liked CRU, they've gone to our meetings, and they still want to be involved with our organization. We do have Republicans United, which is the alumni version of CRU. You don't have to be a college student, you can just be yourself, either because you're a high school student who's transitioning to college, or you've already graduated, you've never attended college, we don't care. If you would like to join Republicans United, membership fee is only $10 one time, and then you're a permanent member from then on forwards. We do have a constitution, which is basically the same as CRU's, but if anyone's interested in joining, speak to Julie after the meeting, and
Or they can speak to me.
or speak to them, right? Other than that, does anyone have like any concerns about the club, given everything that's happened in the last month and a half? Does anyone want to talk about those issues? Yeah.
What was renewing on?
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah, any questions at all? You can ask anything you want.
Did you wind up attending that rally last week or on
The
April
patriotism?
15th? You did?
Mhm.
And did you get any pushback or issues?
no, everyone's been very supportive. Everyone that came up to us understood that the media has an agenda. I had said things that were inappropriate. I apologized for it, but how they were interpreted and used by the press, obviously. If we were a hiking club, they wouldn't have had an issue with us.
Before the event or during the?
During the events, just we had random people come up to us and they understood what happened and they've been very supportive. If anyone had any issues with us, they didn't speak with us during the meeting.
One other thing is, I don't know how aware you guys are what's occurred with the Arizona GOP this year, but the establishment had a great deal of influence over the AZ GOP, as did the McCain aspect.
Yes.
That has come to an end this year for the first time since I've been in Phoenix, which is going on 3 decades, 2.5 decades. So when I said I was going to attend, they said, well, mention precinct committeemen, because a lot of people don't know that that's even that's available.
Just last year, I had no idea what it was. Went through college and high school without ever hearing. I volunteered for the GOP, and not once was that ever brought up until Dan Schultz actually informed us in our group and got us to become PCs.
Yeah, so precinct committeemen is like, I think, what is it, like 1 out of 125, 150?
125.
125 Republicans. It used to be 1 in 100, but they changed that. So every 125 Republicans that are registered, you can have a precinct committeeman for that district. And you were talking about how there's so many independents, and that is true. I mean, I think it's like 1.23 or 1.24
But we're able to
million.
target them on walk list as well, though.
So, but what's interesting is I don't think the independents understand that by not being engaged in either party, they actually wind up getting less choices, because then they don't have an active role in the direction of either political party. And so, I think there are 1 million strong now, and I think the Democrats are 1.1 million, and I think the Republicans are like, just over 1.2 million. So, if you guys want an active voice in the Republican Party here in the state, usually the party will gladly take your money, but they don't talk about getting your voice or your involvement, right? So, but the boots on the ground are so important today, because we've lost, we're now down to 5 Democrat House seats versus 4 Republican. We've got a split Senate, right now, and we've got a Democrat Secretary of State. So we're on the brink of flipping, right?
Yeah, certainly.
Moment, I was a PC a few years ago, and it happened that I was a few days late at continuing my involvement as a PC. And within those few days period, John McCain stuffed all the empty PC slots, and I was not able to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows you just how important, being a PC is. A lot of people think it's, it's not even a lot of time or effort really.
Right.
We had a meeting a month and we talked about some important issues.
Yeah, there's two ways to become a PC. There's the easy way where you just go out, you get 10 signatures in your precinct, you submit it to the county recorder's office, and you're in. That's the easiest way of doing it. The
Well,
second,
you're not totally in at that point. You have to actually get voted for on the ballot.
well, yeah, but the thing is though, there are 9 vacancies, and usually there's like 1 or 2 people in your precinct doing it. If there's an actual 15,
Well, but if you
9,
don't actually vote for yourself after you do that, you're still not in.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
And while that may be the easier way, it's also the better way because you have a quicker opportunity to become a state committeeman.
Yeah.
And another important aspect, not just on getting your voice heard, but let's say some of you guys, as you graduate college and move on to your bigger and better things and decide to run for some type of public office, this is a great foundation. And also when the party sees that you put in time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears, they're more likely to back you when you decide to run versus some other up and comer or some individual that's already been there.
Right. And then the harder way, depending on your area, is to get the county or the LD chairman to endorse your application to get in, which a lot of us in the room have done that. Thing is though, depends on who the chairman is. That if they're not accepting people in, like in the Santa Cruz Republicans, they haven't, I think in the last 10 years or 15 years, appointed anyone because it's been his clique that's been dominating everything and he doesn't really trust newcomers.
Well, I can tell you for LD 25, which is when I reached out to you guys a while back, we need people, and that covers a lot of the Mesa area.
Do we have a few LD 25s in here? Okay.
I have at least 6, I think 5 or 6 in LD 20.
So that's one of the reasons I wanted to see what you guys had going on as well, and see how involved you were and what you stood for on top of that.
Right, so we are all over the place. I'm LD 18, I was the first in crew to do it the election way. And then we had a meeting where we got everyone together, talked about what a PC was, how to become a PC, why it's important, the fact that 40% or 60% of all seats are vacant. You can definitely swing the party to one direction or the other by just bringing in just a couple of people where you have now a voting bloc who will vote for the policies you believe in. And we do need a younger representation there, especially when the lowest age is like maybe 50.
For sure.
Yeah, the I got to know College Republican United when we were both working on Maria Sims' campaign, and that was one of the things that I loved about this group versus the regular college Republicans is that this group is much more grassroots oriented. They get out and they get the work done, like the hard work that so much of the party doesn't actually end up doing. And I firmly believe that we're at the point in Arizona now that Republicans cannot simply get out the vote to win. I think that's still a little bit of a misnomer, as that we count too highly on just getting out the vote and saying, hey, we'll just go tell Republicans to vote and vote early and we'll be good. But we're at the point now where we have a lot of people that have become independents. Independents are basically a third of the state now. We still have a Republican majority, but not by much.
Right.
And a lot of the Republicans, there are a lot of Republicans that do swing their votes to the left. Kirsten Sinema won because a lot of Ahwatukee Republicans in particular voted for Kirsten Sinema instead of Martha McSally. So we cannot rely on simply just getting the Republicans out. We need to get younger people activated. We need to get younger people out there volunteering, and younger people need to know how effective that they can be. I mean, I'm not someone that's had a lot of experience politically, but I've been able to get legislation passed, pushed through, passed, and signed into law, not being elected to anything. I've been able to stop a lot of bad things from happening at the City of Phoenix, just in the brief time I've been at this City of Phoenix Council. And I've been able to rally a lot of support around initiatives that Democrats should have been able to push through and didn't.
When I was in college, I didn't really recognize how important my job opportunities were to the political environment. If you've got one party that's congesting roads on purpose, bringing in, with open borders, extra supply of labor to offset the supply demand, putting in more regulations and more taxes, you have less business development occurring and less job opportunities and less income as a result. So this isn't just like what you can do for the Republican Party, this is what you can do for you and your family out of school. This is so important. I mean, I'm here today, not because I like to spend my Mondays, talking about politics necessarily, but I care about the future for my children. That's what got me involved in this kind of stuff. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
Just a suggestion, I would suggest even reaching out to like a high school students. This case recently of the Covington kids, 15, 16 years old. But you know what? They got energy, and there's no better time to really influence them for viewing causes in the right perspective.
Right.
Okay?
So Kenya is an example, because when I met her, she was 17 in high school, and she was trying to start a college after-school program, high school after-school program for the Republican Party at her school.
That's
and
cool.
She needed to find a faculty advisor in order to have that go. No one volunteered to do it. She went to the principal, she went to janitors, anyone that would be willing to be in the room that would be allowed to do all this, and no one was willing to do this. So we fought back and forth with the principal, we wrote letters, we started this whole campaign. She was not interested in doing it. And it's unfortunate because even at ASU, there are a lot more Republicans on this campus than people realize. They're just afraid to put their face out there. They're afraid about their grades being affected by a activist professor. They're afraid about how their roommates are going to react to their affiliations with the Republican Party, or friends. There's a lot of peer pressure. So they often say, like, Rick, I want to join the crew.
Afraid too.
The faculty's afraid too, absolutely. Before we had Charles Loftus as our faculty advisor, we went out to about 6 other people, and they all said, I'm a Republican, I love what you're doing. I'm not going to put my name on anything that you guys are doing, just because of how my employment could be at risk.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about what we just had to do?
Sure.
Okay, so, with what just happened, essentially, like, the media's, like, go-to thing now is just to call everyone a racist. You're a Republican, you're a racist. It's pretty much their thing. And so it doesn't matter for all the things that you just said, that what the Democrats are pushing is actually fundamentally, naturally causing the minimum wage to need to decrease more by flooding the market. It doesn't matter that the policies that they do fundamentally hurt poorer communities more than and whereas Republican principles actually help to uplift the wealth of poorer communities, none of that matters. They just want to put these ad hominem attacks and call them facts. And so with what we had to do, yes, the guys, I mean, the things that were made, that statements that were made were totally unacceptable, and that was known. But the perspective they were saying them in, which is not excusable, was that it was in a private setting, but still not appropriate to talk that way in a private setting. And so, but the thing is that as Republicans, we are supposed to take personal responsibility for the liberty that we have at our disposal. And so that's what they did. But if that was able to be set as a precedent, that you can just go and yell out racist, then you in the future would end up having people from this club, or anyone else that calls themselves a Republican that's a student here, for the left to think that they could be empowered to call things that have nothing to do with racism, racist, and try to shut down your clubs, try to expel students, try to force that narrative to be a very authoritarian, bully pulpit of just being able to yell racist. And that's why it was so important to make sure that we could have appropriate consequences, but not consequences that ended the club, not consequences that students could be expelled, because that shouldn't be the precedent. And we also need to have an environment that kids can learn. Like, why do we want to have a situation where you have someone, let's take the other side, that you have someone that legitimately is racist, legitimately is an ethno-nationalist? Why would you want a situation where they stay that way in secret, and then there's never the opportunity to help sway their ideology back to being something that's not full of of a hateful ideology.
And let's talk about the Overton window as an example. What I said in private was egregious, I agree with that, and should not have been said. But at the same time, you have the Democratic Socialists at ASU, affiliated with Antifa, calling a black reverend a race traitor and other things I can't even mention.
Yeah.
And nothing is done about that.
Horrible,
No
horrible
articles were
racist.
written about it. In fact, the articles that were written about it said that they were community organizers calling me out for
Praising
my
them.
stuff, but ignored the whole fact of what they were saying in public, and then death threats on top of it too. Nothing
Yeah,
was said
it-
about it.
The way that the left acted at that rally was absolutely just horrifying. They were a big, huge mob that
Which
wanted
rally-
an excuse
which-
to get violent.
Which rally is this?
So we did a press conference that the CRU leadership went and apologized, a very heartfelt apology. Like they worked really hard to make sure that they were, not having an empty apology be out there, but then following up with actions to show that these aren't the values of the Republican Party. And I thought that what they did was very courageous. And so the left decided to take advantage of that and use that to become this huge, scary mob. They were yelling the N-word out regularly, like loosely. They were yelling out.
This reverend's a Democrat, by the way. He's not a conservative.
No,
This is to
and he wasn't there to justify what they said. He was there to assess an apology, to assess if they were really like.
They didn't like the
hurt
fact
by
that we had a platform to even apologize.
Right. And so, yeah, and in fact, their demands were that everyone that everyone is opposed to Trump, that everyone supports socialism, and if you're not doing those two things, then you are a racist.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a playbook
Yeah.
from the left.
And-
Character assassination, because that distracts from policy conversation. Policy conversation is very enlightening.
Well, and when the policy conversation came up, because that's the direction.
They asked me
Right.
blatantly after my apology, do you support building the wall? Yes. You're a racist. Everything you said has legitimized your
So you
fact.
clearly don't apologize because you're a racist. 'Cause
Well, yeah, you answered it too succinctly. You'd say, well, I'm concerned about the security of our nation.
I did that. They wanted a yes or no
We've got 7 million
answer.
people in the US, 7 months of 100,000 people crossing the border is 10% of the country, of the state's population.
Yeah.
I don't know
They
how
don't care.
schools, the police, I don't know how the border patrol could possibly handle all of that. I don't know how my friends or family would be
They
safe.
want ICE and the Border Patrol abolished.
They call it the murder patrol in Tucson.
Yeah. So these guys, these were about, what, 70 kids, you think?
Maybe plus.
50?
I say 50.
50? Okay. And they were an angry mob. They were yelling at the top of their lungs. They would not let them speak at all.
We have this whole thing recorded, by the way, and
Yeah.
we will release it at some point, not cherry picked like the media
Right.
did.
And they got extremely aggressive. They would not give anyone even their own private space. They were looking for it to become violent. That is essentially what they were looking to do. They were trying to make it violent. They were looking for it to be violent. And it was interesting because they didn't know who I was, of course. And so afterwards, after the guys left, I stuck around and started interviewing him, asking him, okay, fine. You oppose the border, but you say that you're for safety of people and you don't want people to be hurt. Okay, how do we save kids from being sex trafficked? And even with those discussions, they got very aggressive. They did not want to talk facts or policy. Said, oh, we're not qualified to talk about that. But you're qualified to call someone a racist for wanting to have protection for kids at the border?
Well,
Doesn't make
fentanyl's
sense.
coming over, I mean, one shipment of it was enough to kill like every American 4 times over.
Yep. So I think that these steps that are being taken of what you want to add to the Constitution is good. And I think that just, I think that what this club has done is really important for not just the Republican Party, but for just political discourse in Arizona in general, because you have been very open in making sure that you have people from both sides come and talk. I mean, you had me come and talk when I was just fresh off the Libertarian Party.
And we got a lot of grief for that too.
Yep, not knowing what I was gonna say and what I supported. And, and you still get grief for me coming and speaking. And I think that is the hallmark, I think, of Republicanism, is that we must stand for free speech.
Circle the wagons. You may not even agree with that person 90% of the time.
Yep.
Take the 80%.
And we must be able to have open discussions about policy that we disagree with. I frequently will reach out to Democrats and progressives that I don't agree with on a lot of issues to talk about policy, say, okay, well, where can we find common ground? Where are the things we agree with? What can we possibly get done? Because we can't have it be that we're just yelling at each other all day long. So, before I close, are there any other questions for me?
Even if we're off topic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Marissa, for coming. Hopefully Maupin will come real soon. You guys want to talk amongst yourselves?
Yeah, I'm not here until, just so you know.
Okay,
So I'd say wait until 8. And then
until 8.
That's it.
That's when we have the room anyway, so.
Okay, yeah, because we don't, I mean, it's a funeral, so he doesn't have
Understandably,
control over it.
right.
Catholic funerals too, so they usually draw out.
Right. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming today, and thank you for the support on the against. I like to call it zero vision, and every single voice is so important in making sure that we save our cities.
So what time should we be there tomorrow?
2:30. Well, I get there a little bit early. I get there like 2:15 because they're probably gonna pack the place fairly early. What they're gonna try to do is fill the seats with their colored shirts people if they show up. I'm assuming they do just because of the person behind this. And so what they like to do is get all their colored shirts people in the main auditorium so that you can't see that there's anyone else that's supporting it. When the main auditorium fills, there's overflow downstairs and across. But so if you can get there at 2:15, that would be much better. And they're gonna have everyone goes through security because we've had the far left POTR group be very aggressive in the meetings in the past, and so we've had to change a lot of security protocols. So there will be there's a single line, you can only get through the door that has the security through it and whatnot. So just be prepared for the security line to take a little bit longer.
Do you want us to speak, or does it matter?
Yes, please speak. It does matter, it does make a difference. So yeah, if you're comfortable with speaking, please speak.
And if you're not, then you do the comment card that you're opposed to.
Yep. But
And if you go to her Facebook page, she has all their emails listed as well.
Yeah, and I'll post the same thing today in the group. Yeah, and I worked really hard on my video. Most people think it's funny. It was my first try at satire, so it just is such a ridiculous proposal that I just wanted to do satire for it. I was like, I can't even seriously talk about this issue. I was like, it either makes me extremely insanely angry because I hate having traffic, I hate driving in traffic. It's the worst nightmare ever. Or it's just a joke. So I went on the joke side of it. So otherwise I just curse expletives or something.
So we'll say that this is the conclusion of the meeting. Stick around though for Maupin, but what we typically do at the end of the meetings, we do a group photo. So if anyone that would like to come up, take that group photo, you're more than welcome to. If you're camera shy, don't feel so bad. You can take the photo if you want. I'll turn this off.
I can take it.